Hi, all. I'm going to start reading for Core 3 at page 198. This is part way through chapter 14. Letta just attached the bottle of ink to the cart that has Benjamin in it and has just thrown herself off of the cart before it went away. Finn and Marlowe successfully attached a bottle of ink so that they could track where the cart goes. So we're starting on 198, and it's right after the little page break on 198. The bell rang 8 times before the first fingers of dawn appeared. The wind had settled. It was still there, but only a tame version of itself. Letta knew how it felt. The storm inside her had also quieted. She was worn out from the emotion of the night, the lack of sleep, the incessant reviewing of what had happened. She couldn't explain why she had jumped on the cart. It hadn't been part of the plan, nor had she realized that Benjamin would be there, right beside her, breathing, feeling. It was as if she had blocked it out in the planning stage. As if to think of Benjamin would have been such a distraction that she wouldn't have been able to cope. And he was alive. She just wanted to hold his hand and comfort him, to stay with him in the dark forest until morning. Finn had been shocked. He'd spoken to her about it when they got back to the shop. "What were you thinking? Did you not realize they would have felt your weight on the cart? What were you going to do when they reached the dumping site?" She had no answers for him. Besides, she also had the practical things to worry her. Had she attached the bottle properly? Had she removed the cork? She couldn't remember. All she could recall was the sound of Benjamin moaning, the feel of his feet under the sacking. What was he doing now? He had spent all these hours lying in the open, his wounds bleeding, wild animals on every side, a trail of blood on the forest floor. Marlowe and Finn had taken her back to her house and stayed with her, and she was glad for their company. They were worried. She could see it in their eyes. Finn had a large bruise under his right eye where the gaffer had struck him. Marlowe was quiet, no doubt reliving all that had happened. She had to remind herself that Marlowe and Finn went on missions like this all the time. This was not new to them the way it was to her. She was filled with admiration for them. Was it only a few weeks ago she had despised the desecrators and all they stood for? "Can we leave soon?" Letta asked, as she saw the sun send out gentle rays in the morning sky. Finn shook his head. "I don't think you should come with us, Letta," he said. "If the shop is closed, it will arouse suspicion." Top of 200. Letta jumped to her feet. "You can't be serious," she said. "You can't expect me to sit here while Benjamin is thrown somewhere in the forest." "But won't they come looking for you if the shop is closed?" Marlowe asked. Letta knew they were right. They would come looking for her. She needed a reason to be gone. Could she say she was going on a word-hunting mission, as Benjamin often did? She didn't know if he informed Noah or the Gathers before he left. She could put a note on the window. She ran to her desk and started to write. Closed, 2 days, use Dropbox, wordsmith. She showed it to Finn. He frowned. "Very well, then," the older man said. "Get ready. Bring whatever water you have. We'll go first. You don't want to be seen with us. Follow in a few minutes. Meet us at the bridge." Within moments they were gone. Letta hurried around the house collecting her water ration, wishing she had time to go get more. She took Benjamin's bag, his toolkit, his maps, a woolen sweater for him, and all the herbs she could find. When she was ready, she put up the sign in the window and opened the front door. Light flooded in. The storm had blown over, and the sky was clear and baby blue. Mrs. Truckle stood looking at her. Top 201. "No harm," Letta greeted her, though inwardly she was cursing the day Benjamin had asked the old woman to keep an eye on things. Mrs. Truckle nodded toward the sign. "Where you go?" Letta felt the color mount in her cheeks. She didn't like lying. "Word finding," she said. "Word finding? Where?" The little woman had her head on one side, her small button eyes squinting back at Letta. "The forest," she said. "Have Benjamin's maps." Mrs. Truckle frowned. "You tell Gavers?" she said. "Benjamin always tells Gavers." Letta hesitated. If she told the truth, Mrs. Truckle would probably drag her to the roundhouse to get permission, and she might be too late to go with Finn and Marlowe. "Yes," she said, fastening the leather satchel. "Have to go now. Weather good." Mrs. Truckle caught her arm. "Food? Come now. I talked to Mrs. Pepper." "Have food," Letta lied. "Need to go." "On your own? You too young. Bring Werber." Letta pulled her arm away. "No," she said. "Go now. Alone." She hurried away before her old teacher could say any more, but she could also feel the old woman's unease, and she knew that Mrs. Truckle was the kind of person who liked to get to the bottom of things. She couldn't worry about it now. She had to get to the bridge and meet the desecrators, if they were still there. that was the end of 201. Now I'm on 203. This is chapter 15. This is for all 4 core classes. So that part was just for core 3, and now this is for cores 1, 2, and 4. So this one is chapter 15, page 203. This one's called End. This is word number 168, and that means last part. Letta could see Finn and Marlowe waiting for her as she approached the bridge. She breathed a sigh of relief. "Come," Finn said, making for the gate. "What should I say to the Gavers?" Letta asked, with one eye on the 2 hulks guarding the gate. "They won't give you any trouble," he said, and marched on ahead of her. Letta had no choice but to follow him. Finn and Marlowe hurried through, eyes down. Letta followed them. The Gavers looked away. "Some of them are easy to pay off than others," Marlowe said with a smile, and Letta found herself nodding as if such things happened every day. She looked around. In front of her, the forest opened its gaping mouth. Silence reigned. There was no bird song, no sound at all, except for the slight ruffle of the wind as it passed through the trees. We're on the top of 204. And Letta, and just to recap a little bit, Letta, Finn, and Marlowe are headed into the woods now to try to follow the track that they made for the cart that has Benjamin in it. So top of 204, second sentence or third sentence. To Letta, it sounded as though the forest was breathing quietly, steadily. "We go through here," Finn said. "Keep your eyes open for the ink." Finn disappeared into the gloomy passageway that lay open ahead of him. Within seconds, the trees closed in around her and made it feel like it was dusk again. Her eyes raked the ground, looking for the telltale red splashes. "There," Finn's voice sounded unnaturally loud. He was hunkered down, and Letta could feel his excitement. She went closer and saw it for herself. The deep red of the beetroot ink lay on a flat leaf of butterbur. She tore the leaf off and pressed it to her face. There was no mistake. Beetroot. Marlowe clutched her hand, so they found the trail. "We're going to find him," he said. "We have to hurry," Finn said, but he patted Letta gently on the shoulder before turning and heading off through the trees. An hour later they were still walking, chasing every drop of beetroot ink. Letta could feel the musty dampness of the forest soaking into her bones. Her legs ached. The ground was heavy with fallen leaves and treacherous with tree stumps and sudden holes. Thorn bushes arched out of the undergrowth, their long necks clawing at her skin. Every 50 strides or so the forest threw up other paths, branching right and left, top of 205. Each time they had to stop and wait while Finn searched for the red ink that would show them the way. Letta plowed on, slightly comforted by the sound of Marlowe trudging behind her. Every few minutes she looked up to catch glimpses of the sky through the dense canopy, an intricate cloth of blue and gray furrowed with twisted bands of cloud. Then she had to go back to looking at her feet, trying not to fall over, trying not to twist or break an ankle. There was a strange atmosphere in the woods. A hushed kind of waiting clung to everything. Nobody willingly ventured in here. When the last earthquake had taken place, wild animals hitherto held in captivity broke free and established new territories for themselves under cover of the dense forests. Tigers, lions, and snakes had all been spotted here. During one particularly cold winter, some of the animals had ventured out and encroached on the town, looking for food. Letta had listened to the terrifying stories people had told over the years. Never in her most vivid nightmares could she have imagined herself in here. She concentrated on her feet again. More than once she looked up, only to find herself walking through a spider web, the sticky silk clinging to her face and hair. Images plagued her as she walked. Benjamin lying on the open ground all night in the driving rain, his hands bleeding, animals stalking him. She tried to push them away and imagined seeing him again, taking him home. With a sickening lurch, she realized she could never take him home. Top of 206. Where would they live? Maybe the desecrators would give them shelter. She felt something shift inside her, a dropping feeling, as though she had jumped from a cliff and down below her was nothing but darkness, uncertainty, and fear. What future did they have? They had stopped again. Finn went off to investigate the new pathways, while somewhere in the distance an animal roared. A wolf, a bear. She looked around her, wondering again what was out there, what lurked in the dense mess of trees and rocks. This way, Finn nodded to his right, and they were walking again. Hours passed, the sky was streaked with mauve, and the sun had disappeared. Would they find him before nightfall? A few minutes later, Finn called a halt, and they sat on a fallen tree to eat their meager rations. From his bag, Marlowe took bread and a hard, gray-looking cheese, along with an apple for each of them. Letta handed around water, and they sat in silence, glad of the respite. As soon as the food was eaten, Finn was on his feet again. "What time is it, do you think?" Letta asked. "Evening," Finn said, and started to walk again. Half an hour later, he stopped. "What is it?" Letta said. "Don't you smell it?" Finn sniffed the air loudly. Letta inhaled too. "Smoke," Letta said. "Could it be smoke?" Marlowe shook his head. "Out here?" "This way," Finn said, hurrying in the direction of the sharp, acrid smell. This is the top of 207 now. A few minutes later he held up his hand and gestured for them to be quiet. Letta sniffed the air, turning her head to where the wind carried the smell at its strongest. Wood smoke. Finn hurried them on, moving stealthily. Letta followed him, trying not to make any extra noise. She could hear it now, the crackling of a fire. Finn waved them in behind an enormous oak. Letta leaned against the great tree and looked to where Finn was pointing. Letta stretched her eyes, unable to believe what she was seeing. A ring of fire. Someone had built a circle of fire in the middle of the forest. "There's someone in there," Marlowe said, raising his voice to be heard over the crackling of the flames. Finn moved forward as far as the next tree. Letta and Marlowe followed him. There was someone there, moving around, a small figure dressed in black. Finn beckoned, and they moved again. This time they could see her clearly. A small woman in dark clothes. Long hair streamed down her back, giving her the appearance of a girl until the light from the fire caught her face, and then Letta could see the deep lines on her tanned skin and the splashes of gray in her hair. The woman was pouring water from a rusty can along the line of the fire. In the middle of the circle was a bundle of rags. Top of 208. Finn signaled to Letta and Marlowe to stay while he stepped forward. Letta watched him as he approached the circle of flame. "No harm," she heard him shout. The woman didn't answer. So just to recap a little bit, they have been walking in the woods searching for this blood trail and following it. And then Letta realizes that she's not even going to be able to bring Benjamin home because he is going to be banned from Ark, and they aren't going to be able to live there. And so she's getting a little nervous about that. And then they're walking along and they find a fire that has been lit by this old woman. So they are about to approach this woman. "No harm," she heard him shout. The woman didn't answer. "No harm," Finn said again. "Can you help us?" Slowly the woman turned to look at them. "Who you?" The woman's voice was rusty, the words struggling out of her throat as though they were causing her pain. "Outcasts," Finn said, "looking for a friend who was banished. And how is it I am knowing that what you say is the truth?" The woman bent down and picked up a stout wooden branch, the top of which was swathed in cloth. She thrust the branch into the flames, and it lit at once. She said nothing, but Letta could see now that this was a weapon. "It is the truth," Finn said. "We are not Gavers. We are here to find our friend." "How many you be?" The woman lifted the torch, lighting Finn's face, but her eyes scanned the environment. "There are 3 of us," Finn said. Marlowe took Letta's hand and they stepped out into the light. Letta could feel the heat coming from the flames and stroking her face. The woman looked at her. "Who are you looking for?" she said. Top of 209 now. "My master," Letta answered. "Benjamin Laszlo. We know they dumped him near here." There was a long silence. The woman never took her eyes from them. No one moved. Then the woman picked up her watering can and doused the flames in front of them. "Enter," she said. Letta followed Finn into the circle. "Over there," the woman said, pointing at the bundle of rags. For a second Letta didn't understand. She turned her head slowly to the bundle at the heart of the circle. The bundle moved. "Benjamin?" Letta crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and threw herself to the ground beside him. His face was drawn and gray, half covered in a scraggy beard. So here's Benjamin. This woman has saved him, and they found him. His face was drawn and gray, half covered in a scraggy beard. His hair clung to his head, damp and matted. His eyes were closed. She gripped his hand. He moaned, a deep guttural sound that pierced her heart. Instantly the old woman was beside him. Letta watched as she lifted his head and pressed a small flask to his lips. "Hush now, hush, my friend," she crooned. "All is well." Benjamin's face relaxed. The old woman put his head down on the ground, hard on the ground, on the hard ground. Excuse me. "What did you call him?" she said without looking at Letta. Top of 210. "Benjamin," Letta said, stroking the skin of his hand, trying not to look at the bloody mess that was his fingers. "And you?" "Letta," she answered. "I be Edgware," the old woman said. "Now we need to move him. The fire keeps away Wolf. and his friends, but not for long. They came last night for look. The fire jittered them, so they not stay around too long, but they be back. Their hunger will be stronger than their jittering. We will carry him, Finn said suddenly, appeared Finn had suddenly appeared beside them. Where do you live? The old woman hesitated. You don't know whether to trust us or not, Marlowe said. I want no dealings with Noah's kind, Edgware said. I rather live here with the beasts. At least they be what they seem to be. Marlowe nodded. I have heard of you. They call you the Black Woman of the Woods. I just didn't believe you existed, he smiled. We have met people you rescued. They save selves. Edgware said, I just give them a helping hand, like this one. She nodded towards Benjamin. I couldn't move him, so I kept vigil with him, I thinking he would die here, but now maybe no. I be taking you to my dwelling. Follow me. Without a word, Marlowe and Fid leaned down and picked the old man up, top of 211. Letta kept a firm grip on his hand. He muttered something and then went quiet. Stepping out of the fire circle, Letta felt the cold again. It had grown dark and the air was now frigid. She couldn't imagine anyone living in this place. How did Edgware survive? Where did she get food and water? She glanced at Benjamin. She had thought she would never see that face again. He had been in her life for as long as she could remember, a steady, gentle presence, always there, never faltering. It had taken this to make her realize she loved him. He had been mother and father to her, friend and mentor. In the first days after her parents left, he had distracted her, taking her on long walks, talking to her about his craft. Later, when they didn't come back, he had started to train her as his apprentice, directing her, giving her a purpose. She'd always thought of him as a stopgap, someone who would care for her till the people she loved came back. Now she realized he was the person she loved and he was the person who loved her, and she didn't want to lose him. She bit her lip. She wouldn't lose him. Somehow they would come through this. The forest thinned out as they walked until they came to a clearing. They followed the strange woman across an open field. In the half light, Letta could see that the ground was rutted and covered in a carpet of dense white flowers, making it look as if a heavy mist had fallen on the starved scotch grass. Top of 212. Before them lay the remains of a village, clusters of deserted houses crouched behind waist-high weeds, brambles, and tattered shrubs, with their eyes blinded and their little doors kicked in. Letta had never seen a place as lonely. So they've got Benjamin, and now they are at a village that has been deserted, and it's like the remains of the village, and no one's there. Edgware led them on till they came to a cottage set away from the others. It was a sturdy little house with a reinforced wooden door and small windows. Around the perimeter was a dry stone wall, and Letta could see torches set in the stone at regular intervals. They followed her through a gate in the wall and up the winding path to the door. There they stopped. So this is Edgware, the witch's, the woman, the woman's house. Yeah, they called her the woman of the woods. So here's her house. Middle of 212. Edgware lifted the heavy beams that guarded the door, kicked it open, and went through. Then she beckoned them in. The men had to bend their heads to enter. Letta followed, glad to be in out of the cold. Inside was a small room, neat and organized. There was a makeshift bed in the corner, and there Edgware told the men to leave Benjamin. As soon as he was settled, Letta felt on the floor beside him. We need bandage for fingers, Edgware said. Letta could only nod. Her throat felt tight and constricted, and she felt tears prick her eyes. Edgware slipped away. Letta stroked Benjamin's hand. You're going to be all right, master, she whispered into his ear. You have survived worse things than this. Edgware came back with a basin and old rags. She took a piece of cloth and soaked it in the water. Then very gently she started to remove the black clots that clung to the nail bed. Benjamin groaned. Can you take over here, child? Edgware said. I need to get him potion for the pain. Letta nodded. She took the cloth and very tentatively started to clean away the dried blood. In her heart a fire of pure rage was burning bright, but she ignored it, focusing on the work at hand. A few minutes later, Edgware was back with a herbal drink. She pressed the cup to Benjamin's lips. He opened his eyes for a second. Just drink, Edgware said. As soon as he had swallowed the liquid, he fell back into his comatose state. He be weak, Edgware said, right weak. Can you make him better? Letta said, stopping with her work to look straight into the other woman's eyes. Edgware shook her head. I can nae make people better or worse, she said. They do that their own selves. He be an old man. He be badly treated by ignorant people. that can naysay themselves for the fools they be. Why would they do this? Letta asked. Why? The old woman shook her head. Who knows, she said. Maybe he'd tell us when he able to. Times passed slowly after that. They cleaned his hands, and Edgware put a salve on the raw flesh. Top of 214. So now they're taking care of Benjamin. This is the last page of the chapter. What's in that? Letta asked, looking at the thick cream clinging to the open wounds. Oak bark, lobelia, comfrey, marshmallow root, mullein leaf, skullcap, black walnut, aloe, and calendula in a base of beeswax. The old woman recited the list of herbs like a mantra. Letta had never heard of most of them. Oak bark being natural antiseptic, mullein leaves ease pain. I have some small store of beeswax since before the wild bees became extinct. You are a healer, Letta said. Edgware smiled. If you like, she said. Now let him sleep. Sleep be the greatest healer of all. Edgware moved away, but Letta stayed there, holding the old man's hand. In the background, she could hear the gentle hum of conversation between Finn and Edgware, and she could smell garlic cooking, but she didn't move. She remembered a night long ago when she was about 9 or 10. She had woken from her sleep with a fever. She had called out for Benjamin, and he had sat there all night with her, because she was afraid to go to sleep. She looked at his worn old face, and her heart filled with love for him. He had been through so much. Was it all to end here in this cabin deep in the forest? As if in answer to her question, the old man opened his eyes. Letta, he said, Letta. And that's where we're going to stop. So just to sum up this chapter, thanks for listening. They found Benjamin in the woods by tracking the red ink path through the woods. They came upon a fire and they met this woman who's known as the Black Woman of the Woods. And she had found Benjamin and was trying to nurse him back to health and save him from getting eaten by wild animals. They meet her, they talk to her and get to know her a little bit. And they get her to trust them, and then she brings them to her house and lets Benjamin rest and puts some medication on his hands and his fingernails and tries to help him recover. And he's resting, and then at the end of the chapter, he wakes up and realizes that Letta is there. So that's where we're leaving off for today, and we will read 16 tomorrow. Thanks for listening.